Free Speech TV presents the only independent news outlet in the Middle East. Watch the Al Jazeera News Hour live from their Washington, D.C. bureau.
Anger at the U.S. financial sector boiling over on Wall Street today. Several hundred people packed into Bowling Green Park in Lower Manhattan for what they're calling an Occupy Wall Street demonstration.
Now, these protests began almost 2 weeks ago now under this name, Occupy Wall Street. And during that time, a clear goal, clear message has yet to really surface from these myriad demonstrators, leaving many to ask, what does Occupy Wall Street want?
What are they protesting? Nobody seems to know.
Some claim they're rallying against corporate greed. Others say they're fighting global warming, social inequity, gas prices.
These folks are deluded in a lot of ways and probably provide the best argument for national service for 18-year-olds that we have ever seen.
Like Woodstock meets Burning Man meets people with absolutely no purpose or focus in life. No wonder they have nothing but free time to be down there. They make up a slogan or a cause as they go along, and they're just looking to go out there and dirty the streets, and they really don't have any idea about what they're doing there.
Look how much more presentable I am after being around that filth.
Welcome back to Occupy the Media. Thanks for staying with us. In this final segment, we want to hear from you, so give us a call. Do you think Occupy demonstrators are Woodstock meets Burning Man, or does the Occupy message resonate with Main Street? The call is free, 877-575-FSTV. That's 877-575-3788. And we will have some social media posts to go through, but first, our first topic is how most Occupy encampments around the world have been shut down, physically evicted by cities and authorities, but we keep hearing about this American Spring. So Marcy, tell us about what's going to be happening in the next couple weeks and months.
A lot more actions, a lot more demonstrations, a lot more noise coming out of the occupations. They're planning on going out and protesting against Bank of America. Foreclosure is still a really big issue for them. They're going to make a big splash on May Day, hopefully nationwide. Still talking about students, and they're, like I was mentioning earlier, still trying to reoccupy spaces physically.
And you, or earlier, we actually talked to an Occupy Wall Street protester, Manissa. So let's take a look at that clip.
Since the eviction of Zuccotti Park in November, I guess a lot of people have been thinking Occupy is quieter than normal. And it's been winter here in New York, so there's been less out on the streets, but Occupy has been involved in organizing, putting together a bunch of sort of big campaigns for this spring. Among those campaigns are organizing for the May Day general strike. I'm also really excited about the Bank of America campaign because I think it's a campaign that's gets to the heart of what Occupy is about, which is financial structures and financial institutions, but really focuses it in on one bank in particular, Bank of America. And I'm excited about that campaign because there are a lot of ways it can go. There's protests, but there's also online activism, getting people to move their money. This past weekend, on the 6-month anniversary of Occupy Wall Street, people reoccupied Zuccotti Park, and that was actually really beautiful and felt really joyous and amazing until the police came in and kicked everyone out again at around 11:30. But I'm excited I think generally my big general excitement is to be out on the streets again with my friends, marching together, and just the sort of mass movement aspect of Occupy. I think during the winter we've been organizing so much that we haven't had a chance to come together joyfully. It really feels like we're back in that way, that people are out in the streets again, trying to set up encampments in public, is trying to take back public spaces as spaces of dissent, and that's really exciting. It feels really good. So and it really felt on Saturday night like spring is really here.
And that was Manissa of Occupy Wall Street. And Marcy, the big question that supporters of Occupy Wall Street and opposers of Occupy Wall Street are all wondering is, where does it go from here? She's just one member of Occupy Wall Street there in New York, but she talked about a lot of things. One of those was focusing on big banks.
Yeah, definitely. I think this has been one of the reasons that Occupy Wall Street even, started in Zuccotti Park right near Wall Street. The financial sector is one of the big things that they think really needs to be reformed in order for, the country to get back on track as they see it. It's this injustice, this economic injustice of a few having a whole host of money and very few having
And so
nothing.
it'll be interesting to see which direction the movement goes now that spring has sprung. You're watching Occupy the Media. Now it's time to take some more calls from the 99%. Okay, and we have a caller on the line, Ted from Michigan. You're on Occupy the Media.
Hi. Hey, I just think it's time to recognize that either we control the very rich or the very rich will control us. I think it's time to reinstate Glass-Steagall, and it's time to end the speculators' control on our markets, the lifeblood of our society, heating oil. This should be a sin to have speculators determining that old ladies pay for heat in New England. This is a sin for speculators to rise up the price of gasoline to control the elections in our country.
All right, and so Ted, I'm going to have to cut you off because you made a pretty interesting point that has been echoed a lot among Occupy Wall Street protesters is Glass-Steagall, which, Don, gets back to the whole notion of financial reform and how we got into this mess.
Exactly, and Wall Street does not want Glass-Steagall. They do not want a tightening up of regulations coming out of Washington, D.C. That's why the Occupy movement has picked up this issue. And I think that you're gonna see more actions directed at Wall Street and also at the institutions that form the entire capitalist structure. That reinforces this inequality.
And actually, Don, on Twitter, we have a posting that echoes that, or actually approaches that question at #OccupyFSTV. The question is, how do you think the Occupy Wall Street movement could be most effective at reinvigorating the public now that the 15 minutes of fame is over? But to me, it gets back to this notion of tactics. Where does it go from here? Before it was focused on occupying public spaces as a symbol for income inequality and all these other issues. But then we've seen other very large direct actions, particularly on the West Coast, that take things on. Right. I want to know what you think. What do you think is the direction?
Well, social movements tend to ebb and flow. I mean, you've seen similar patterns in other movements preceding Occupy Wall Street, in the civil rights movement, the anti-war movement, the women's movement, the gay movement, etc. These movements don't just happen overnight and then go away. Movements germinate for a long time. They simmer for a long time. And I think what you saw in the case of the Occupy movement, over the winter, a lot of folks kind of went into a temporary retreat, reorganized their focus, did some organizing on the ground, and are coming out
Marcy,
fresh.
Before we go to a caller that we have on the line, the one thing that Manissa from Occupy Wall Street had said is, yeah, we've been kind of not out in the streets because we've actually been organizing. So this will be interesting to see how this launches forward when they've had actual time to organize and build that type of infrastructure.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the exciting things about the movement at the beginning was that it was so spontaneous that it just kind of happened and people rode the wave. And now that we've had the chance, that winter came, people have wrapped their heads around it a little bit, started to organize a little bit better. And so I think we're going to definitely see some really interesting things coming in the spring now that everyone's had the chance to lay down some foundations, some groundwork.
And so let's hear what one of our viewers thinks. Tyler from Idaho, you're on Occupy the Media.
Yeah, I just want to talk about Senate Bill 514. Basically, this was proposed in Congress, and they're fighting against chemtrails.
Okay,
I don't know much about it. I'd love for if we have time, for the viewer to give us a very, very short explanation on it.
Well, actually, we're going to have to move on. We asked our Facebook and Twitter followers to give us their 2 cents about the future of the Occupy movement. What issues and topics would you like to see the Occupy movement take on? And here's what they said. Hoyle writes, bring attention to the astronomical markup on prescription drugs and the rising cost of healthcare in general. Matt chimes in with shed light on the personhood of corporations and the PACs, the political action committees. Christine writes, burst the bubble of the temporary temporarily embarrass millionaires so that hopefully 99%ers will stop voting against their own best interests. Well, that's all the time we have for this week, but the conversations are continuing in the streets and in the online world on Twitter and Facebook. Check it out. Thanks for joining us today. We will see you next time on Occupy the Media.
They have seized upon the thing that truly unites a lot of Americans right now, in a good way, which is, the greed of Wall Street and the incompetence of politicians to rein that in, has wreaked havoc for the rest of us. And it's very clear that after people voted for change in 2008 and voted for we don't want this to happen, it's very clear that nothing is changing and nothing is getting any better. So there's an incredible anger.